Peirce, and about 15 years ago, I had read a book by her called Frequencies, and it kind of started me down this path. And it's an honor to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So, what brought you to the world of metaphysics?
It was a really gradual path for me. I guess my mother always believed in reincarnation,
Mhm.
and I agreed. I thought, oh, that was made logical sense, And then I kept my interest going in those sorts of things, even in my early childhood. But by the time I got to high school, I started reading a lot of those kind of books, the older ones, Edgar Casey and Alan Vaughan and a bunch of the
Mhm.
stuff, and then transpersonal psychology and psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain, and all these things. And it built up my interest in mysteries.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I just kept, I was a designer. I was a graphic and interior designer. So I was really kind of grounded, but also artistic in a practical way in my career. But my side thing was all this other stuff. And it just that got stronger and stronger and stronger. And I moved to California and up to Marin County, where it was a hotbed of all this stuff back in the day. And it got even stronger. And I took classes there on clairvoyance development.
Mhm.
And I was good at it. And I didn't really know why I was taking it, but it just kind of blossomed.
Wow.
And as that got stronger, then I was a corporate art director at a company up there, and then that they laid me off. They laid off their entire graphics and art department, and so the other thing was there, and it became a freelance business, and everything just grew. And then I met Kevin Ryerson, who's a trance medium, pretty well known with Shirley MacLaine's book,
Mhm.
um, and he and I worked together for 4 years. And so it just was like this interesting, like the path opened and opened. If I said yes to this experience, then another one came. And then I ended up being a part of this group called the Center for Applied Intuition in San Francisco. And the director of that was a scientist at Stanford Research Institute. And he was doing a thing called intuitive consensus, which was where he had a kind of team of intuitives. He would ask a set of questions to everybody separately, get readings on it, then kind of cull that for commonalities and
Mhm.
similar information. And then he started selling that to some of the big companies in the Silicon Valley. So we did that for a while. Then the Japanese got wind of it, and they asked us to come over and do um, teachings and trainings for them. It was businessmen mainly. So then I went to do that with him, with the director, and and then that started a 20 some year, um, I guess, gig you would call it, in Japan, and working all over Japan with teachings and doing readings and things. And then I just started traveling a lot around the world, and it just grew and grew and grew. And I started writing, let's say I wrote The Intuitive Way in 96
Mhm.
or so. And then Frequency came a few years later. But I'm now working on the 11th book. So that's been a joyful part of my career. I like writing a lot.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember, I mean, yeah, I read it like 14 years ago, so my memory is a little sketchy on it, but I remember it just being one of the most clearest explanations of all the stuff that you mentioned prior, like when I was growing up as a kid, all that. This, the information in the books that I had access to, not that they were sketchy, but they were still trying to hide secrets, kind of. You kind
Uh-huh.
of had to make, especially like the occult books. They were like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so they weren't clear. They weren't for like, you know, the average person. Um,
Uh-huh.
but I thought your book was, and I found a lot of the ideas in your book kind of connected with a lot of the ideas that I had also was reading about in Hermeticism.
Uh-huh. Yes, that's true. The Hermetic teachings are very much similar. I think I must have had some lives in there, but I I think about spirituality and religion, and for me, religion has an intermediary, a priesthood that
Mm-hmm.
tells people what God means, and I don't want that. I like mysticism where you have a direct connection with the higher energy line or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, even believed that God was some kind of a big man on a throne and doing these things. It wasn't like an entity, it was a force or a large something, and, or a consciousness of some sort. And so to read about a lot of other kinds of spiritual religions and things and kind of melded them. And then I used my own common sense and my own connection, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
to form a sort of a worldview that, it's like physics, the laws of the universe, and physics does it in a physical way and metaphysics does it in a non-physical way. And there are mathematical patterns and, there's an order to it. And so I like the Pythagoras teachings and
Mm-hmm.
some of those older things and the Egyptian stuff. And then I traveled to Egypt two
Really?
times, I was in the king's chamber in the sarcophagus twice
What
and
was
had
that like?
visions. That was
Really?
amazing. Yeah.
What you have a vision of?
Well, the first time I and it came on quickly and it was just a brief thing, but it was a great teaching. I was looking at a field of energy that was sort of indigo in color, but it had black dots all through it. And I suddenly knew those were my blockages, that my belief systems, old things that I hadn't cleared yet, that it was in
Mm-hmm.
the way. And I could look at the black dots and they would get closer, or I could look at the indigo background and the black dots would disappear. And I was doing that for a minute. And then I really saw that, what you pay attention to is what occurs for you. And it was hard to not pay attention to the black dots because they were so, um, attention getting. And, but I was really practicing and then it stopped. And that was, okay, Penny, get it, do it, you know. Um, and then some years later, the next time I went in, I was sitting on, here I say God's knee, or this huge being. I was sitting a little like I was a little person sitting on a big knee. And and the whole idea was that I would point to somebody or something that needed help, and that being would do it. So my job
Wow.
was to ask, and
Mm-hmm.
I could determine the flow of things by, um, you know, directing my attention again. And then whatever I chose, yes, of course, we'll do that with you. You want to help that little kid? We will do that. And that was, again, brief, but very powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what were some of the blockages that you've had to clear, and what were some of the ones that were most difficult? Because I know
Uh,
that I struggle
yeah.
with a lot of that.
Yeah. Um, I think some of it was around old feminine stuff. Like I finally got that I had died in childbirth a number of times. Some awful things where like some men ripped the baby out of me and whacked it against a wall and killed it. And I was, like those kind of traumatic things. They just like, you inhale and you forget to exhale, and so I had fibroid tumors, in my uterus this life. So we got that handled. Um, and but just things like I've been very aware of not wanting to have any ego, and catching, and I'm a double Leo, of course, so that's in my face all the time. And but yeah, so then anytime I would feel myself going in that direction, I would like really try and like let go and become more transparent and don't, I don't need that kind of identity.
Mm.
And just more humble path, but not humble less than. Humble to me, I started feeling it. What it was just like it's being in truth with what you are in the moment, you know, and you don't try to change it or be less than whatever's happening. Or if somebody really appreciates you, don't say, oh no, that was nothing. Just say, just thank you very much, and you don't have to be better than anybody else. It's just, so I started practicing those kind of things, and uh, I think that there was also, I grew up with parents who'd been in the depression with their parents, and
Hmm.
so we had a kind of a frugality thing in my family. But we had my father made a good amount of money, he was a corporate president, and so we didn't suffer. But it was always, common sense, be frugal, don't pay too much for something, and all that. And I kind of had that in me about, um, I was calling it deprivation consciousness.
Hmm.
And so I've been writing a book on money now, and so, which came in a weird way because I kind of whack on the side of the head in the middle of a session with a client. Like, and I said, you're just supposed to write about money now. And I'm like, but I don't know that much about money. Do I know anything? You have to do it next. That's the next one. And I had another book outlined, and they no, and then it wouldn't leave me. But anyway, so I was working on this book, and I came to an insight about gratitude and generosity as something that goes together. They are states of being that interconnect.
Yeah.
And so I started to feel into what gratitude was and generosity was, and I could feel many other states of being in them, like sweetness or sincerity and other things that gratitude is composed of. And so I really went deep into what those things are. And I kept thinking about it a lot and writing it in the book a lot. And I decided I wasn't thinking, well, maybe I'll just try to be more grateful. I decided and chose that I'm going to get out of deprivation consciousness, because who does that serve? And into generosity and gratitude. And about a week or so later, I had a heart problem that came up out of nowhere, and I got put in cardiac ICU. I had a mitral valve blow open, and um, so I was in the ICU for 3 weeks, and my heart literally, I had open heart surgery. I mean, so how do you get to be more generous and grateful that you have your heart opened? And so I just took that whole thing as not a tragedy, but a rite of passage. That this is something that, while I had no near death experiences or any big memories of being out of my body,
Hmm.
but I figured while I was there, and it was on the spring equinox, which is supposed to be some kind of portal this year. Uh, and I think I accessed a lot of stuff, but I didn't know it at the time. And it's been dribbling in little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, because recovery process from that kind of surgery is long.
Hmm.
And so, um, it's kind of a mystery, but I believe that everything that happens to you is for your own evolution and everyone's evolution. So I don't take things negatively. Um,
It's
you
hard to
know,
do. Is though.
it's a practice. It's a
It
spiritual
is,
practice.
but you're absolutely right. Like framing things with gratitude, it makes everything much easier because you're creating
Right.
that cycle of energy
Yes.
going in that direction. And like you, I grew up with parents who had that lack,
Mm-hmm.
and even though we had everything we need, there was always like that fear of lack.
That's yeah. Yeah. And there's something too about when you look at things with gratitude and generosity, those blockages that we were talking about
Mhm.
will surface in a softer way. you're kind of like, oh, I see why I'm not being generous right now. And I don't want to be that way. So I'm going to go back to my own, I call it your home frequency, that state of, I almost think of it as soul in the body, like you're being your wiser self now.
Mhm.
It's not out there somewhere, I always say you don't have a soul. You are a soul. It's not something like a possession.
Yeah, that's a complicated topic. You know, I mean, I do think the point of view now that we're, I don't know, if we're a spark of the divine or cosmic consciousness, but we're the idea of oneness. I believe that in the end of this, there
Yeah,
is some type of oneness.
absolutely. When you get out into the spiritual realms, especially even if you just go into your right brain,
Hmm.
everything is so interconnected and mutually supportive that you can't even talk about it. The right brain is the direct experience of intuition or direct knowing or that kind of unity or communion, maybe consciousness. Whereas the left brain can talk about it. And I think Terence McKenna once said, that the function of the left brain is to interrupt the right brain
Hmm.
so that you can know something, pull something out of the background so you can focus on it. Otherwise, we would just be swimming around in all knowledge and no need to use it really necessarily. But what you place your attention on happens. It's just like my sarcophagus thing with the blue background and the black dots.
Yeah.
That what you place attention on is what occurs. And I think in spirit, after we die, that's the way we work. And if you don't have that ability of focusing attention now, you're not going to take it with you very well into the higher frequencies.
Hmm.
So I think it's good that we practice now. I have a chapter in, I think it was Leap of Perception, that's like practice pretend dying. And the publisher didn't want me to put that in there. Oh no. And I said, yeah, but it's important. Um,
That's
you
like one
know,
of the things also like from the Tibetan Book of the Dead sort of focuses on that.
oh, it does. Uh-huh. Yeah, because why not get the skills now and become more enlightened? And then when you pass through, drop your body or whatever you're doing here,
Mhm.
then you're in it still. And you don't have this, big period where you have to remember and make up things and forget the other blockages and get back to your true self. You're already there and you bring
Yeah.
your memory with you of the lifetime as well. It doesn't get blocked as much. So I think there's a lot of benefits to, um, well, what would you call that? I guess being super conscious with your conscious mind or something like that. Bringing getting the messages from what you notice.
What is that like for you when you're receiving this information for your books?
Ah, um, well, it's funny because the last couple of books, which that would be Leap of Perception and Transparency, was the last one, and then this one. I did not do the typical chapter by chapter outline with what the outline of everything is going to be in the book and where it's going to be. I just
Mhm.
made a information dump in a document of everything I could think of, and then it started to organize itself, and then I could start to make up ideas for the chapters,
Mhm.
and so I got that going, and then as I started to write, that's when, see, I always say I'm going to connect with the writers in the sky or whatever,
Mhm.
who the other beings that love writing that would like to play with me in the writing process. And so I figure that's like a council out there that's part of my group. And so I write with them, but I don't have any invasion from individual beings or anything.
Mhm.
It's all kind of telepathic, I think. And I just get ideas like, oh, that should go in there. Oh, explain this, what that means. And then I'll get new information. like when I was writing Leap of Perception, which is all about moving from our linear way of thinking into the spherical holographic way of thinking, which is the new intuition age. I was like, what is holographic thinking? Like that's what I was supposed to write about. And then it gave me all kinds of methods and how the brain would be shifting. And I was like, this is amazing, And so my books are, like you said, I translate higher complex information into palatable form for us here, but it's still somewhat dense. You can't read it fast.
Yeah.
If you try to zoom through it, you won't get it. But if you slow down, because almost every sentence sometimes is a quotable, it's like, it's so packed and comprehensive.
Right.
So,
that's one of the things that makes writing unique and reading unique, I think, still.
Yeah, I go back to my books because I can't remember what I wrote. And then I say, oh, that's good. Yeah. But part of me is like, I just want to write one book on this topic. That's it. I'm going to, and make it good and beautiful, and musical and whatever, however I can make the language carry the vibration of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's part of that transparency thing that I'm starting to really get into is I just started a Substack thing called Becoming Transparent. And that's kind of a neat format too. But yeah, I write the first draft, and then it's not sometimes well organized because I didn't have the outline. So then I go back and I say, oh, okay, well, this part should go in that chapter, or let's like shorten this, or let's make an example here, or and I can get the feeling of the flow a lot better on the second round. And I like it to be so a copy editor doesn't have to do any typos. I like it really clean when I finish it.
So when you're going through this process, do you think that well, when we're talking about the left brain, right brain, do you think that the information is coming from the right brain because the right brain is like accessing a place like the Akashic records?
That's a good question. One of the things I wanted to do was be able to read the Akashic records. And I think I might have accessed that during my surgery. But sometimes when I ask myself a question, I get a big answer. And where's that coming from? Well, it's the big us, I think part of it is that I must go out and back pretty quickly to open to expand and encompass a larger kind of understanding of the certain question, which, you could answer a question at different frequencies, at the physical level, at the emotional, mental, or I can go out to the abstract where the universal laws are working, and the higher principles, and get a feeling of that, and then bring that feeling in and translate it down into palatable language. And I think that's what I do, but it's like an X-ray machine or something, just kind of going through it. When I work with people, I kind of do the same thing. It's not so much psychic or predictive, that's not my emphasis, but I look at what's going on with them, and then I can see through it into inner patterns of, because I think we're all a blend of love and fear, to some degree.
Yeah, definitely.
And we do things for both reasons sometimes. Yeah. And but I'm really all about getting the fear cleared out so more of the light can come through. And so I'll find the gifts, the talents, and I'll find the fears and how they're interacting, and then describe that in a way that they can understand, and then start to do something about it. I think that's what it's come down to. I think is useful, And what good is it to know you're going to be like this, or you were this in a past life, if it doesn't really relate to how you're going to be expressing yourself right now?
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is really hard to live this dualistic existence.
That's an understatement. Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
conflicting.
it is in a way, but I think partly what I've come to is just really finding the spiritual realm inside the physical.
Mhm.
It's all here. It's not a separate dualistic thing, really. We still think in a linear fashion, which makes things dualistic,
Yeah.
right? Because linear perception, I'm here and you're over there. And so there's empty space in between us, but not really. It's all consciousness, it's all energy. So um, I think that when you start to feel that whatever's happening in the inside of yourself, like with thoughts or feelings or insights and things like that, are also happening simultaneously in the external world. Like you'll have some event that happens, or get a physical experience of something, or an object will become a symbol for you or something. Uh, so they're simultaneous. So I've been calling that the law of correlation, and to
Mhm.
start looking for the correlation of what's in you and outside of you. And you may notice something first in the outside world, like some kind of omen. And then you go, say, why am I noticing that? What's going on? What message am I giving myself? Because what is that the symbol of? And then I make the connections and I get the aha, and it could start with an inner feeling of like frustration, and then I have a backup on the freeway, and then I go, okay, what was under that? And I'm always drilling down, what's under that? What's under that? What's the core thing?
Hmm. That's
And
similar to me, I think, because like what I do is I'll notice things that I never like, I never noticed that before. How did I miss that? And then I'll start noticing other things I didn't notice that sort of correlate to that one thing. And I'm like, this must mean something.
yes, yes. Um, I had an odd experience. I had gone to the cardiologist and they were telling me that at the worst possible scenario, I would need a defibrillator put into my chest. And I'm and I just felt, wait, I didn't think it was that serious, and he said it'll extend your lifespan. And I thought, I have never used the word lifespan in relationship to myself ever. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not going to live to 100, or, like I thought I was. Well, yeah. So I came home, I was kind of depressed for a
Right.
while, just back in deprivation consciousness. And um, so scene shifts, and I have gotten this new pair of shoes that are they're slip-on types, but it was a little tight. So I had a shoehorn, and I was getting them on with the shoehorn. And I had the shoehorn on my bathroom counter. I went in the morning to put the shoes on and it wasn't there. So I thought, oh, I must have left it in the closet or somewhere. But then I'm going to go to cardio rehab at the gym. And I decided I'm going to take a book and a headphones and a bottle of water. So I need my bag. Oh, I'll take the black bag because it goes with my black pants that I had on. And it's stored here in my office in the closet. So I come and rummage through and find it. It's hanging under a whole bunch of other bags. I get it out. I throw all my stuff in it. I get to rehab and I'm rooting around for my headphones. And there's the shoehorn.
Hmm.
And it is the same shoehorn. I have not used that bag in easily over a year. And I'm like, uh-huh, uh-huh, and then I get this kind of message or whatever thought that, Penny, anything is possible. Just remember, anything is possible. And you know miracles are possible. Don't slide into that old consciousness. Stay with the shoehorn experience. And then I thought, what is a shoehorn anyway? If you were interpreting a dream,
Don't force anything.
don't force that. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but I've thought of it as something that helps you slide into a new
Oh,
reality
that's a good one too.
that it was too tight for
Well,
you
they're
for
both
a
the same
while.
thing, I guess, sort of. Yeah,
Right.
not forcing it and easing into
Oh, thank you
something.
for that insight. That's really
Ah,
good. But I think of it as the state I went into during the surgery that I
mhm.
didn't have quite the memory of, and I was too small or not thinking well enough to be able to get into it fully. And
There's a
so
lot of meaning now.
yeah, and so I have my shoehorn as my new power object. Anyway, I just have to remember that. And I've had other things like that materialize or dematerialize over the years, but I hadn't had anything for a while. And also, it was like, hey, you're connected. Don't
Right.
worry about that. Because during recovery, all your brain energy kind of gets sucked into your body, to help the healing. And you're just like a zombie for a while. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
anyway,
Huh. So much
yeah.
meaning though with that shoehorn. Another one that just sort of popped into my head too is like, the idea that our soul is bigger than our body, where our consciousness is bigger than our body too. Our
Mm-hmm.
awareness is bigger than
Right, right,
what would actually fit in that shoe. I don't know. It's
right,
weird, all
right.
the stuff that comes to
It
me.
is interest. It's such an interesting experience, and how it got thought up by whomever, me and them and whatever. And then I would get those thoughts right at that moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like sometimes like that stuff's coming from somewhere else, but then we had kind of like, well, no, it's not really
but we're
coming from
also
somewhere else
there.
because we're it. Yeah.
Yeah. I always think of us like reverse icebergs. We're down here, the little individual self is connected to the big iceberg out there, which is a huge collective consciousness. And
Hmm.
that's us also. I could say that is me if I get to that frequency. If I slow my frequency down, it looks like I'm separate from all the other individual reverse icebergs. Um, and it's all a matter of frequency.
How do we raise our frequency?
I think it's not through willpower for sure.
Uh-huh.
It is um, by remembering certain states of being, particular, like kindness, like generosity and gratitude. I
Hmm.
mean, going into them and like feeling them again, and feeling how things could be more effortless and magical and loving, and that many are supporting us at any given time. That we're so interconnected that we forget to ask for help. And you start to run through those thought states, or contemplate beauty, contemplate smoothness, or something like that. And you get to this state, which is not like high frequency, like jacked up, like, it's not that. It's almost like the difference between theta and delta and maybe gamma or whatever's out. It's
Uh-huh.
really smooth, but huge. It's like your sphere around you, your spherical self, gets big and encompasses so much of the unified field and knowledge and love and understanding of how things work in those higher realms. And so it's more about being quiet, you know, quiet and raising your emotional quotient, and thinking thoughts that are generous thoughts. And um, but I think we sometimes have erroneous ideas about what something like peace is. You know,
What
it's
is
not
peace, you think?
it's not a suppression of
Hmm.
something. It's an integration of everything that we are. And that, every human has been violent. Every human has gotten murdered, or, had something terrible happen and lost children or been banished or those things. And we all have that in common. It's an ability that we have to feel empathy that allows us to start to find unity. And so I think peace is, sometimes it's just going with the flow, like a figure eight, like just staying in that, and not going like an arrow going in opposite directions, but more like you get to one part and it turns. It never stops. There's a turn at the end of each thing that you thought were opposites. It
Mm-hmm.
turns and goes back to the other side, and then it turns and goes back to the other side, and the whole thing is peace. It's a kind of feeling state. Part of what I was writing about with money was that when you feel into money and what is its core, if it, everything has an inner self, everything has a divine inner blueprint, every object, just as well as every person or tree. And so money's it came into being, I think, as out of love. It's a love motivation that helps people learn to connect with each other who might be living in different tribes or different kinds of consciousness or different languages, to exchange. Here we go again. I'll give you, you give me, we'll do this. And so it is about reconnecting and creating communion and creating trust, but it got way out of whack because of fear again. And then we got greed and we got ego. And then that has distorted the way we work with money. So it's created, scarcity consciousness and all this abundance consciousness, that I'm kind of sick of all the jargon, but that's
easy to get stuck in that.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess it's hard to really define some of these states of being.
Yeah, I mean,
but if you
money, I think of it as a flow of energy.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what it was originally intended to be.
Yes.
Yes. Just a
way and consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the gift societies really still do that. And barter even still kind of holds to that a lot. But you get Bitcoin and those kind of things, and then you've just got this crazy greed thing happening because quick, profits and all that stuff. So anyway, it's a lot to think about. And I said, I don't know anything about money. And then just the other day, I was looking through blog posts that I had, and I was going to use it somewhere else. And I thought, well, I'll just go back all the way back to like my early ones. So I went back to 2008 to pick that. And I opened it up, and there was a blog post about money and money flow. And a lot of the terms that I'm using in the book, I was using in that blog post of 2008. So I've got to work that into my book somehow. But it was like, I went right there, and it was like, just how do these things
is that
happen?
weird for you when you go back and read something like that you've written a long time ago? You're like, wait, that's like, was that me that wrote that or somebody else?
No. And even my early journals when I was like 20 or something, I was writing, pretty wise things. And it's like, you are the soul all the time. You've been there all the time. Stuff. You didn't lose anything. It's all there, but, maybe framed in a more naive way back then. But it's such a continuum.
I wonder if it's just like we're limited to the amount of this stuff that we can bring to the forefront.
It could be, and it could be timing too. It's like, you go through phases where you're remembering stuff that and bringing it in and then kind of grounding it. I think journaling is a great way to do that. It makes it concrete enough that you've got it. And so I'm teaching a little bit at that time and giving it out. And then that helps it become more real, the cycle with people. And then later, it's the audience is ready for frequency. And that book is still selling. They're going to do a 15th anniversary edition of it for next year. It's a great book. It's like a Bible or something.
Right. So when you first started probably hearing, because we're around the same age and we grew up with a lot of the same material. When you started reading about quantum physics, how did that make you feel? Like when all of a sudden, like, wow, some of this stuff is possibly backed up by science.
Fantastic. Yeah, because it's just it made me realize that there are these, metaphysics and physics. They're, the same thing, but in different formats. And physics is in the physical format, but there's a metaphysical principle behind it.
Mhm.
And metaphysics is really the understanding of universal laws. How do things work? Yeah, wormholes. Yeah, entanglement, blah, blah, blah. All those things are happening in consciousness too. Yeah, it's like a completion sort of feeling of, yeah, get it together, integrate it. It's not either or.
Yeah, for me too, like it just gave it a whole new life of its own, and validated it a lot, because
Mhm.
I would say, even like when I was still reading about stuff in my 30s, I think I was reading it, I was curious, I was interested, but there was a part of me that said, it's not possible according to physics, and then quantum physics comes around and says, well, yeah, it is, or at least information for me that I could understand. I mean, quantum physics
Mhm.
was around, but there was not
Yeah.
really books around that I could read it and actually
Uh-huh.
understand it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I can't get through the scientific writing very easily,
Yeah, me neither.
but the concepts I can. And
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's all the matter of spirit in matter. That's what's happening. It's that immersion, integration of, and we're realizing that it's always been there, that we were the ones who separated everything with our left brain. And so we're just remembering now that we're becoming more intuitive and higher frequency, that everything is already together.
Mm.
What you need is already inside your ball, with you. You just place attention on it and it will start to come and drop in frequency.
Mm.
Or you take attention out of something and it will dissolve back into the field.
Do you believe that Gaia, as the planet, is raising its frequency?
Yes, yes. And I have had dreams where I've seen a kind of bifurcation of the planet. Not it splits in two, but there's always been, like everything has an inner reality or a higher frequency reality and a physical one. But I think that the non-physical reality is getting stronger and stronger and more filled in, so that we will at some point have a kind of a splitting of the beings that are higher frequency will go and live in that planet. And it's still here, it's not anywhere else. And we're not changing shape particularly, we're just being transparent in the way we act and know. And our bodies may emit more light or do some things like that. Um, and the other beings who aren't quite ready for that yet, they will just incarnate back onto the earth that they know. And so
Mm.
it won't feel like any change at all. It's not tragic. But I don't know when it's happening, but it could be, within 20, 30 years that this will occur. But I really, and it was called, in my dream, it was like this event would happen. It was called the void in my dream. And in order to survive the void, you had to become like the void, which meant transparent. And
Wow.
this man in my dream, who is a healer, had been working on the East Coast, and I was in California. And he said, he was in a business suit. And he said, the people there are really solid. And I went, oh, yeah. And then he looked at me and he said, well, you're right on schedule. And I looked down and my left shoulder and arm were transparent.
Hmm.
I mean, I could see through it. And then I knew, oh yes, that's the thing. I'm supposed to become transparent. And and then it's as though the event was like time would stop for like a moment or whatever that meant. Um, Ken Carey calls it the nanosecond of non-time in his books. Um, but it's like something would pause and then come back. But when it came back, there would have been such an infusion of higher energy that would come back at a different frequency. But if you were non-attached and you were not in polarized consciousness, you wouldn't have any problem. It would just be boop, boop. But if you're really attached to an old reality and a new one, you would have a little struggle and have to go back onto the other one that is the right frequency. But so I knew that a lot of people would die on the planet, but it wouldn't be a tragedy. Because I was like, oh yeah, right. Like, maybe I'll be one of them. I don't know. But and that has stuck with me. And as like a lot of what is going on now in the world is the clearing of the subconscious mind of individuals, but also of nations. So we're watching it happen now all over in the news, where everything is like super polarized. Right. And that's at the end of the ego. You have polarization, major polarization. I thought, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, this is the right. That's the wrong way. That, until it wears itself out, or, does itself in. Because we're in a process of ego death, which just means it doesn't get to be the boss anymore. The left brain doesn't get to be the master. And the right brain is the one that brings us all the wisdom and knowledge and higher, intellectual knowledge as well.
So what do you think happens to the people who don't want to change?
Well, there either be mass exoduses from the planet, or in groups leaving, kind of, or
you mean like on ships, or
well, in accidents, death? in earthquakes, or in war, or in illnesses. Look at pandemics, whatever. And I don't know. It just feels to me like I keep saying it's an act of compassion, because to try to force someone to get out of strongly held beliefs about who they are and how the world works is very difficult, unless it's kind of a gradual process, or they have some kind of visionary dream that wakes them up to understand a lot of these higher principles. And so yeah, but that's what I have gotten. Yeah.
Yeah. I just always hope like it's not like in the book of Revelations.
I don't think so. But I read a piece that somebody had talked about Armageddon, and the real meaning of Armageddon is the lifting of the veil. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. And it does. And, you lift the veil and you're going to see your blockages, that you're acting the way someone acted toward you, and that it was a wound, and you're sad, really deeply about it, not angry. Anger is to keep away the fear and the sadness.
I will say one of the things that I don't do anymore is take sides.
Right. Right.
I just have compassion for everybody involved.
Yeah. I'm compassionate about people being able to wake up, mm-hmm. and be on their own growth path as they can handle it, but also, keep on keeping on. I'm going to keep on making information available and bringing guidance through and putting information out as much as I can, until I don't need to, or whatever's going to happen. I don't know. But I mean, I know that's why I'm here. So yeah. And we do have a sense of that. A lot of people are really waking up to, counseling, coaching, service stuff, mediumship, all these services that connect the spirit with matter and bring spirit into the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's, a big influx of that. And yet a lot of people are still like, like not going to look at it.
But, yeah. A lot of people, I mean, I say the thing, most people they're stuck in religious and political views that don't allow them to have these ideas or experiences.
Yeah. I think
like
so.
Prisoners almost to it, materialism.
And that's a weird kind of security to me, but it is secure and again, compassionate for people who are feeling lost or underneath the surface are not sure how things work and what you should do and what's real. So get something solid like that with rules.
Do you think that a certain amount of people have to be able to cultivate love and compassion for the entire planet in order to bring about the shift?
Yeah, I don't think it's a real high percentage either. I think it could be 50% or less.
And in other ways, we have the help of the planet too, because the planet's shifting, we're shifting.
That's right.
It's all shifting.
Everything's matching these higher frequencies that are coming in, I think, from the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a thing about two black holes colliding back in 2016 or someplace. I quoted it in my book, that sent ripples through, the field around, and it's in the Milky Way, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so sent ripples. Well, that could be what the waves are that we're experiencing of various things. Mm. There's interstellar, all this stuff. I can't, talk about physics, astronomy, right. And those guys are coming up with amazing things.
Yeah, one of my guests recently threw something at me that made sense. It's like, oh, the planet is going through this proton field.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, I have no way to know or not know, but I mean, it certainly sounds possible.
It could be. But they said the sun ejected a huge piece of, at one of the flares that if we'd been in alignment with it, would have whacked the earth like nothing. And those things have happened in the past.
Yeah.
But I'm not thinking it's going to be a cataclysm like that. I think it's a gradual, energetic series of waves that are coming in. And you can feel it. You get hit with one and you either like conk out or you get agitated because your body's trying to adjust to it. And sometimes you need to sleep to let that happen so that you raise up to the next level of functionality, and the earth is doing it. So we're physical, we're part of the earth. Our bodies are doing it along with the earth. And then that means that we notice our spirit more. Because I say the soul is in the body, it always has been, but the mind has been closed. So we haven't been able to realize it. So now we're clearing our mind and our emotional blockages so that we know that we're here.
I think with me, one of the biggest things that blocks me is not wanting to be a part of this collective, Like I look around and I see the division. I'm like, no, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of it. I want to be separate. And right there, I'm setting myself up for the separate way of thinking.
Right. I think we have to see the vulnerabilities of people that allows us to feel communion and understanding, which is heart. Heart is about understanding. I don't know that the heart actually breaks, although we feel it here, but I think it's because it can't do its normal loving function because of some way we're thinking about, like our loved ones are gone. No, they're not gone. They're right here. You can just match their frequency and you can talk to them. Mm-hmm. Nothing is, I don't even see a need for grief in a way, in terms of spirituality. I don't think the soul knows the idea of that. And, but that's our thing of polarization again. Oh, they're here. No, they're not here. And in war, all these people have died horrifically, but maybe they needed to do that in that way for their own growth. Who knows? Or they'll come right back in again. Spirit works in strange ways. Yeah.
So I want to wrap this up. I want to thank you for coming on. It was a great interview, and it was awesome getting to talk to you after reading your book 15 years ago. And where's the best place for my listeners to find you?
My website is just pennypeirce.com, and so that's easy. And then I am on Substack now, and I'm starting to post a lot on there. But my website has a lot of free stuff and downloadable stuff on it also.
Awesome. I'll put a link
So,
to your website in the notes of this
okay.
episode. And when's the money book coming out?
Well, I haven't really finished it yet. I'm still editing, so I'm
Mhm.
not sure. It might be, I don't know if it can make it to out in next year, but maybe 2025 or the end of 2024 if things go well.
It is a process.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well,
So, well,
thank
thank
you.
you so much too for being such a good listener and drawing things out of me.
I try. All right. Well, thank you for being here and hang on for one moment. I'm just going to play the outro.